Born Primitive Outdoor is proud to partner with Montana Knife Company, Marsupial Gear, Evolution Outdoors, Sheep Feet, and Capture Gear. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our sponsors. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Outdoor podcast. I have my longtime friend, Petra Hilleberg, on the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. You're freshly back from the sheep show. Is that the last show you went to?
Yes, I am. Yeah, it was great. It was really, really fun.
Oh, that's good. I'm not a big show guy. I go to them when I have to. But.
Yeah, right now, that's the only show we do. It's a sheep show, and it's just really, really fun to see everybody and so many happy people, and just meeting everybody. It was really great.
It's good. Well, for those who haven't, listened, I've done podcasts with you before. So, well, I won't just tell everybody what you do. Let everybody know, what you're about, and because I'll probably screw it up. So go ahead.
Well, yes, I'm Petra Hilleberg. I'm the president and CEO of Hilleberg the Tentmaker, and we make tents for the kind of higher end backpacking, mountaineering, backcountry hunting, tents that will hold up when you really need it.
That is a fact. And I mean, pretty much anybody listening in, whether they've seen you don't do nearly as many podcasts as I do, definitely, has heard of Hilleberg. So your dad, tell everybody a history of Hilleberg, I guess, because it's pretty cool, like when you dig into it.
Yeah, so my dad, or my mom and dad started a company in 1971. So my dad was a forester, and he was also a ranger in the military, and he was out a lot in the mountains, and he didn't like any of the tents that were on the market. So he started making his own, and he met my mom, who then learned how to sew and figured out how to put his ideas into reality, and started making, basically, he drew them on a napkin, and she would make the prototypes, and then she also figured out how to set up the whole factory. And so since then, we've been making tents that we use ourselves, and that we know that our best friends are basically putting their lives into when they're out. So we've been making tents for over 50 years.
And so I don't want to say pioneered, but the tube tents that you guys did kind of pioneer the more tube style tent.
Yeah, so the very first tent we had was a ridge style tent, and that was because there was no poles did not have shock cord ability, so there was no shock cord, so you couldn't really do a tube tent. But the main thing that my dad pioneered was that he wanted the inner and outer tent to go up together. So when you set up the inner tent, normally on a lot of tents or most tents on the market, you have to then put the fly on top while the inner tent gets wet. So that the idea of inner and outer tent going up together was we were the first with. So he's the one who started that. So the inner and outer are attached with shock cords and toggles, so that you can use them either separately or they go up all together in one step. So much faster setup. So that was the first thing. And also another thing that we were first with that he discovered was a silicone coated fabric that is much, much stronger. And that was the supplier that he was working with, the mill that made the fabric, sent him a new fabric that they said was going to be a little more waterproof. And normally when you get fabric, you take a little bit and you cut it and then you rip it to take a piece, and he couldn't rip it. And so he called the manufacturer, and he's like, well, this fabric is much stronger. And they're like, no, it's just more waterproof. He's like, it's the same. And he's like, no, it's stronger. And that's how they realized that coating it with silicone was much stronger.
So I was trying to Google it there. So it was when I was born, basically 77, 78 is when it kind of.
When we started doing the silicone coated fabric. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now pretty much, because answering Q&As, I get a ton of questions about Hilleberg in general. And so one of the things that Petra has definitely given me shit over time is I'll push the limits of your yellow label tents. But you have different, basically a black, red, yellow label shelters, and those are like increasing into durability, snow load, wind load, things of that nature. And then the poles increase in strength, and then the material changes as well. So dive into that just a little bit, and then I'll
so we wanted to have a way to help people choose a model. And what was really important when we categorized them was to do a neutral, like basically a color, rather than like saying expedition or trekking or whatever. Because, so first of all, it's important to note that we only compare within our own line. We don't compare with anyone else. So we
probably will today, just to let you know, but
that's fine. But we do. But when we talk about, so like the yellow, red, and black, so the black and red label are both all season tents. So they work in any weather, any conditions, and they can handle snow and weather. And what we consider an all season or a 4-season tent that they need to have is that the vents need to be high up so that snow does not cover the venting. Also, any mesh panel needs to be able to be covered up with regular fabric, so that the same thing, that you don't have snow or sand or any rain drift coming into the inner tent. Obviously, they need to be strong enough, but also then the outer tent needs to be able to, or needs to go all the way down to the ground, or the fly needs to go all the way down to the ground. That's what we consider an all-season tent. So both the black and the red label have that. And that is in order for them to stand up the best and have the most success in really snowy, heavy snow load. And then we have the yellow label, which are technically 3-season, but we call them for the snow-free times of the year. And that's because the outer tent does not go all the way down to the ground. So the venting is integrated into the bottom of the tent, and then it has very large mesh panels, but they can't be covered up. So if you're out when it's really cold or snowy, it's going to be colder. But the fabric is lighter. So it's our Carolyn 1000, whereas the other one is 12,000 and 1800, or 1200 and 1800. Fabrics. And that means that they have a 12 or 18 kilo tear strength. However, even the 1000, our lightest fabric, is very, very strong. And because of that silicone coating, not siliconized, but that coating is triple coating, both layers, 100% silicone, makes them really, really strong. That also is what makes them cost a little bit more, but that is because that the longevity you get and the safety increase that you get with having that strength in the fabric is really, really high. So, like you, for instance, who use the yellow label in the snow all the time, I know a lot of people do. As long as you are aware that it's going to be colder, because strength-wise, it's strong enough. It's just going to be colder, and you might have snowdrift coming in underneath it. The poles are the same on the yellow and the red label. When we first made them, we tried a smaller diameter pole, because we wanted to make them as light as possible. But at the same time, we don't do flimsy. So we could make them lighter, but the performance criteria that we have were not met. So when we tried with a lighter pole in the wind machine, it was the difference in strength was so significant that we did not feel like it made up for the weight savings. So that's kind of how we categorize. And most people usually live in the red label space, I'd say.
Yeah, and as far as like the lightweight world, which is a bit of a nightmare to a certain degree for me, and that's with everything from clothing to backpacks to shelters or whatever else. You do give up a lot. And when I say that, the catastrophic failure for a lighter weight option is much higher. This year, actually, on a sheep hunt, I had not one of your tents. I had a blow down. And generally, like, and I'm very upfront about these things with people so they understand, like, if you take a 3-season tent in great conditions and, generally in the timber, right, where you're not getting as much high wind, and you compare that to 12,000 feet with even a mild wind is going to be a problem, especially over time. And what I would say mild wind, I'm not talking like 40 plus, 20 miles. I mean, people kind of fabricate the whole wind thing, like truly with like a kestrel, 20-mile-an-hour wind is a pretty stout wind. And, when it's blowing 20, people probably say 40. It's kind of like when they say an 80-pound pack, but they say 120 is what they're carrying out. A 20-mile-an-hour wind, from my experience, and you don't have to, staying out of it, a 20-mile-an-hour wind consistently over the course of an 18-hour period will blow down most of the 3-season tents on the market today. There will be some, maybe not a catastrophic failure, but there will be some failure. And then when you add the fact that most people probably don't guy out their tent correctly, or sometimes don't guy out the tent at all, you will definitely run into issues. And so with your 3-season tents, what I've tried to explain to people is it's not a matter of like durability. It's just because, as you said, the outer shell doesn't touch the ground. So they can handle pretty high wind load and a decent amount of snow load. But when you look at some of the bigger names, and the one that I had blow down was an MSR Hubba, and it only took 4 hours for that thing. And when those break, and you can dive into this in a second, generally one guy outline snaps off because of how they're sewn. And once that one guy outline snaps off, you're really just on a ticking time bomb, especially when you're not at the shelter, because then all of your structural integrity is gone, because that side's going to fold in. That's going to snap, generally 1 or 2 poles, which is going to rip through your shelter. And then it just is kind of a garbage bag flopping around. Would you say, and you don't have to comment, would you say that that's relatively accurate as far as the 20-mile-an-hour would blow most 3-season shelters on the market today down over a day?
Yes, I haven't tested them, so I'm not going to say that in general. However, we have certain principles. We have our principles that we work with: so the reliability, adaptability, ease of use, durability, comfort, and then low weight is under that. So every tent that we make has to meet all these principles, all these performance criteria in a certain balance, right? So that's why, like I said, like low weight is never on top. It's always at the bottom. So we talk about building function first tents. And that is that they have to be able to handle the weather that we say that they can. We have a wind machine both here in my backyard and at our office in Sweden. And a lot of companies will give you a wind speed rating and say that, oh, well, we clocked this tent at this so-and-so speed. But what that means is that they have bolted the tent down into cement, into a wind tunnel, and then turn the machine on and then clock it, which in our opinion is completely irrelevant to how you're going to use it. So what we do is we turn the wind machine on, and then we go in front of it and set up the tent. And we do that with the yellow labels as well. So that's one of the tests that we do when we make a new model, making sure that one person can set it up. You should be able to set it up by yourself in the dark, wearing gloves in a storm. So that's obviously priority number 1 when you're out, that you can set up your tent and get out of the weather. And then the second test that we do is we do long-term testing in the wind machine. So we have them sitting at about 20 meters per second, which is about 50 miles per hour, depending on which model it is. But say that we run it, and at least 40 miles an hour over. The neighbors complain if we do it over 8 hours, but we do it 8 hours at a time. And that's to see wear points. So usually, where does it start wearing? Like, what is the point that needs to be changed? Are the guy line in the exact placement that they should be, et cetera, et cetera. So those are also things that we look at. Obviously, like you talked about anchoring. Anchoring is key, right? If the tent is not anchored correctly or set up correctly, then you can start getting movement. That's when failure can happen. We sometimes see, we have the guy lines are already attached to the tent. If people pull the guy lines too tight, that can flatten the pole and that can actually weaken the structure a little bit. But, a good setup is key. And then say that worst case scenario happens on our tents. What we do also is that we have pole sleeves on the fly or on the outer tent or a clip system on the dome models. And all of them are sitting pretty high off of the tent. So it's designed that worst case scenario, if a pole breaks, it either goes through the pole sleeve or it just pops out of the clip. But you have 3 layers between you and a broken pole. So you have the inner tent, you have the outer tent, and you have that pole sleeve fabric. And the pole sleeve you can tape up. You can tape up the pole, you can tape up the sleeve, and you can continue your trip. So that redundancy is also built in between you and a broken pole. But with the tent set up well, the odds of having a broken pole are obviously much, much lower. So that's how we set up and test all the tents and have that criteria for them that they should be able to handle that kind of weather. So I'm not going to talk for others, but that's how we do it.
Yeah, and I mean, and again, I've tested and used all kinds of stuff. There's a company that makes, there's more than one. One of the companies that I've used off and on for the last couple years has carbon poles, and that has gone really bad for me so far. And when I say that, it was fine in moderate stuff, but the carbon pole, and keep in mind, back in the day, I don't know if they still do it. There's some companies that make an aftermarket carbon pole for your Acto. I never tried that because the weight savings was, I could poop and it equal about the same amount of weight savings. So it wasn't really worth it. On the carbon pole side of things, there was 2 things I noticed. One, they break, much easier. And then 2, the glue didn't hold for their splice sleeves. So those would slide into the pole or into the actual tent pole. And then the splice sleeve would be stuck in there. And then you obviously would have to uncord it and, flip it back out. But when carbon breaks, it's a little more catastrophic compared to aluminum. When aluminum breaks, it just breaks. And then you have 2 pieces. You can't repair a broken carbon pole. And a lot of this stuff I do because I geek out and I like to just test stuff. So I don't know that companies do a good a job of giving the full picture of carbon poles as they probably should. Without talking.
Like we said, we have a certain performance criteria that we are looking at, and again, like when we looked at making the yellow label and looking at a lighter pole, it was not worth it. We are constantly testing new materials on the market and checking and there's a reason why we don't use carbon poles. Yeah,
but that's the reason why you don't. Is I'm assuming all the reasons I just brought up were that your findings?
Yeah, you said it perfectly.
I have a hard time getting anything out of it, which is very respectable that you don't, you always stay above the fray. But one of the things, like truly testing these shelters for me has taken a long period of time, because you can't, which a lot of people do on the internet, you can't go on a 7-day elk hunting trip and, plant your flag on a shelter, right? It takes a lot of testing. Some of it's just UV, right? Just the sun hitting it. I don't think people realize maybe the effect that has on some of the more subpar, lighter weight fabric.
UV is going to damage any fabric over time. That's UV is really, really damaging to lightweight materials, period. Like, yeah, we have the highest rating UV that you can have, or UV treatment on there, but that there is a reason why there's canvas tents sitting in the desert, right? Like lightweight fabrics are going to deteriorate over time, so you do want to be careful with that. But that's also why we start at such a high tear strength. So if you're starting at like in our red label, or 1200 or 12 kilo tear strength, or if you start with something that most PU coated tents have, they have about a 1 kilo tear strength. So when that deterioration happens, if it's a 1 kilo tear strength, that goes really, really fast. If you have a 12 kilo, you're going to have a much longer lifespan on the tent as well. So that's why, when you're looking at it, when you're looking at comparing different, I think what a lot of people do nowadays, it's so easy to stare yourself blind at the weight and only looking at the weights. But you're looking both at an investment and you're looking at, for most hunts, so you're spending so much time planning for it, preparing for it, and money on all the things that are involved, whether it's the tag or the guide or like everything. You're spending so much money that you can't. You don't want to have your tent or your shelter fail when you're out. So I think especially for people that are going out on the lifetime hunts and things like that, it's so important that's not when you're skimping out on going to the absolute lightest or the cheaper option, because it's not worth it. And that's kind of the security that we're built in with using the materials that we don't compromise on because we're using the tents ourselves.
You're telling me here, bouncing around what I was talking about, though. If you set up one of your shelters in a 3-season shelter, one of your 3-season shelters, and many other the big name 3-season shelters on the market, the UV resistance on your shelter is much higher than all of the ones that I have tested. You really dodged that bullet. So,
no, I did explain it because we start at a much higher tear strength. Then we're going to have a much longer lifespan on it.
So that lifespan, which is very hard to quantify, but in 3 seasons of moderate use, a lot of the 3-season shelters, you can tell just from the color of it if you look at a photo from the beginning to the end. What we can really tell is if you just manually pull on your guy line where the stitch holes are, which are generally, a lot of them aren't sewn into the seam like where you have yours, where you have reinforcement. A lot of times they'll have a patch, right? And so it'll be like my phone, and there'll be a patch with a little Husker Du sticking out, and that rips out, and you can see from the beginning of time when you get it, and after UV, constant in the sun, that literally after 3 years in a lot of UV, you can pull it out with your hand because it's breaking down that material. But the way that you sew yours at Hilleberg, they're in stitch lines, so they're in seams, which is very important.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to function first. So there's not a single detail on the tents that are not there for a reason. And that has not been very carefully thought out on how it's sewn on, how it's stitched together. Also, can you repair it? Things like that. So that's also really important. Now that's, we see some of the outfitters that have been using our tents, like a whole fleet. They can use them for much longer, for many, many seasons, where they were used to replacing their tents every 1 or 2 seasons, whereas now they can keep them much, much longer. And that is obviously part of UV. There's part of what the features are, the way they are, and the materials and things like that.
So out of your shelters, what are the top 3 sellers and what are the top 3 overlooked? What were the top 3 that everybody gets and the top 3 that you can't really make sense of why they don't maybe get a certain 3?
So the Acto is still our biggest seller. So our 1-person red label is still our biggest seller. And then the Niak, which I know you like, in the yellow label line, it's a 2-person, but like a palace for 1 person. And then I would say the Alec, our 2-person dome tent in the red label series. Those 3, I would say, are the most popular right now. The Solo is up there too with our burliest 1-person. One model that I think is overlooked a little bit is the Helix.
Yeah,
it's in our
well, that one is a kick-ass tent. I've had that for 7 years now, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a 2 and 3-person, but it's a tunnel tent, 2 entrances, 2 vestibules. It is so roomy and so light. You have the pack weight on the 2-person is 5 pounds 5 ounces, but it is. You have so much space. You have your own vestibule, 1 on each side, and it's just a really, really good shelter. That's in the yellow label line. I think that one is overlooked a little bit.
I mean, it's overlooked because it's even overlooked by me, and I have one, and I know better. When I say overlooked, I don't mention it as often as I should because I like room, and so I don't ever run a 2-person with 2 people unless it's maybe a chick, obviously. But like dudes, I don't even put dudes in my tent. I just pack an extra when I guide. But with the Helogs, I was going to say, I can't remember what it was, but for the 2-person was just over 5, if I remember correctly. And you can divvy that up easy enough as far as, that goes, but it's pretty robust too. So I had that clocked. I had set it up about exactly where you don't want to set it up just because I had to. But I had that in 40 to 50 mile an hour, not constant, but gusts, for 3 days, with zero issues. So it can certainly handle what, I wouldn't put a Nyack probably through that as much. Not saying a Nyack couldn't handle it at all. But when you compare that to, I don't know what the, I'm losing my brain, not the Onion, the other one I use all the time.
The Nalo?
Nalo, good Lord almighty. The Nalo obviously is more robust, but when I hiked in, I didn't take the Nalo, knowing I might be pushing the ragged edge because the weight savings. With that, the Helogs, I'm trying to put this into where everybody can understand it. What are the 2 main differences from the Nalo to the Helogs?
Yeah, so Nalo, Namach, Onion, they have one entrance and then they have a slanted back end. So in the inner tent, the back end is slanted and then you have one entrance. This saves you a lot of weight because you only have the one entrance. So you're minimizing the zipper usage. So it's lighter. But then if you're looking at the equivalent yellow or red, which would be the Aron, the Kaitum or the Hillegs, they have 2 entrances and 2 vestibules. So the inner tent is completely straight on both sides. So you can utilize every millimeter of the inner tent. And they have 2 vestibules. You have 2 entrances and 2 vestibules. So if there are 2 of you, you can use one each. So the advantage, obviously, with the Nalo and the Onion and the Namach that have one entrance is that you have a much lighter tent. You have a lighter tent. But what can happen if you're tall, you have your lofty sleeping bag or a thick pad, or you have wind packing on the back end, is that your sleeping bag can touch the back end of the tent. That's a disadvantage. The advantage is the lighter weight. But that's something you have to be aware of. So if you then instead go to a Helix in the yellow label, which is still very light, or the Kaitum or the Aron, you get a much, much more comfortable feel and a bigger inner tent. Strength-wise, they're going to be the same. The tunnel tents are, I think some people are a little bit concerned about the tunnel tents. They're not as familiar with the tunnel tent, but you always get the best weight to space ratio. So you have much more usable volume for less weight in a tunnel tent than in a dome tent because you maximize volume and minimize pole usage. So a well set up tunnel tent can handle really, really severe weather. So we talk about the Aron, which is kind of our flagship black label tent. It's pretty much standard in North and South Pole expeditions, but especially South Pole expedition, where you just have no coverage, no shelter, nothing to protect you, and just hammering wind. And that's basically what they use a lot of there. Because it's such a quick, easy setup, and the space is so good.
So I can't. How many tents do you offer? I was trying to add it in my head, and I didn't want to be rude and look at my phone. It's a lot. I just can't remember the exact amount.
We were just talking about it with the sales guys this morning. I think it's about around 30 or so, 27.
Yeah, but that's also including more of the group style shelters.
Yeah, we have our 2 or 3 really group tents, which is actually, talk to a number of outfitters and guides that use our group tent, the Altai, which is really cool. It's still light, but you can, a lot of pyramids are very popular on the market right now. And the problem with a pyramid is that you have you lose a lot of the usable space inside because of the walls being so slanted. You only really have usable space up here. So the model that we've had for a very long time is instead a yurt style. So you get the sides up. So you have much more usable space. You don't lose the space the way you do in a pyramid. So you have more of a yurt style group shelter, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I, on the not, I guess not group style, but as far as the more expedition, and I have one, and I'm gonna probably hack. Well, I'm not even gonna try. Your two more expedition style dome tents. What are the names of those?
In the Four Seasons, we have the Saivo and the Citrus and the Tara.
I wouldn't have screwed that up. Yeah, the Citrus. I would have said that correctly. So I've only used that probably 6 times in probably 6 years, but it was 6 times I needed it.
If we're using it for base camp, for instance, obviously maybe not the tent that you're going to pack up Big Mountain, but as a base camp, so now especially the Saivo, which is kind of the one that's taking over the space of the Citrus, it's even roomier inside, so it's huge inside. Like you can throw absolutely anything on it. You can have as much snow loading on it as you want, and it's incredible. And it's so 2 entrances, 2 vestibule. One is a little bit larger, and then you have it's really tall in the middle, and just a very, very strong burly tent. So if you're going in, if you're waiting for elk and you want to be, you can go really far in and then be up in the morning before anyone else gets there. Even if it's really, really bad weather, in the early snow season, that's a good one to take. Or if you're packing, so if you have horses or anything like that, that's a great one to pack for a deeper base camp.
Yeah, and I was going to throw my 2 cents in. That's and I'll give an example. We had my shelter, which again I hadn't used. Well, this was the 6 times I had used it, and Cabela's Alaskan Outfitter dome tent, pretty much a copy of your shelter. 2 of those blew down and yours was fine. And when I was trying to explain to outfitters about this, is look, I know it's less money, but right, it's going to fail you. And I'm not, this is not Petra saying this is me. So as far as the value of that, for example, these were shelters that were kind of set up and left out, horse packed in. We had the wall tent, you sleep there, and then you kind of get dropped off in these other little outposts or whatever. So as far, and they are a little bit expensive. I'm trying to think, it was $2,400. I can't remember.
They're around there. Yeah. Yeah, they're around there.
Yeah. And so, but are those some, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, for sure. They're more expensive, but, again, we had, a mountaineering guiding company here. They used to get tents basically for free from another brand. And they bought Saivos for their Denali fleet. And I think that was 10 plus years ago. And they're used to replacing them every season. And so if you look at it over time, and I think that's what happens a little bit in with tents, people look at the price and for some reason, this idea is that a tent should cost a couple $100, which, it's an investment. It should be an investment. If you buy one of our tents, it's an investment that you're going to have over a very long time. I just got a letter from someone who, it was very cute. It was it was kind of like a funeral note, like a ode to his beautiful tent that he'd had for 27 years. And he talked about all the trips he's had and how he's honoring it. There was UV had finally kind of taking a toll, but it's over 27 years of pretty advanced mountaineering trips that he'd done all over the world. And that's the kind of investment you have to look at it over time. But even it's a couple of nights in a hotel or whatever kind of hotel you stay in, but it's X amount of nights in a hotel that you're going to do, but you can do it over 20 years.
Yeah. And I was pulling these up because I I've had the Citrus for several years. Is that one, are you going to end up, you think, sunsetting that one eventually?
It's not in the catalog anymore. The Cybo has taken that spot, but we still have them in stock, so it's still an option. So it's still on the website, obviously. But the Cybo 4 is kind of taking the space of the Citrus.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And obviously I just go with what I know, and that's the one I've used. The biggest thing wasn't as much snow load for what I was concerned about the times I've used it. I mean, the one time it did snow 3 feet, and that did blow up the other shelter. So, but as far, it's not that heavy. I mean, when you compare it to a lot of the other options, I can't remember, it's 12 or 14 pounds or something. It's not something you're going to backpack in, but I do pull it in on my sled when I snowshoe in. I do, and it's very manageable with that. The freestanding part of it's handy, as in comparison to like snow. And that's one thing I think probably scares people on the tube tents, is maybe lack of knowledge on dead man anchors or rocking out your guy lines or things like that in rocky areas. But it's really a moot point.
So when it comes to to pegging out, like my dad always says, if you always anchor for storm, it's like when you anchor your boat on the dock at night, no matter how nice the weather is, you always secure it as if a storm is coming. And the same should be true for your tent. So with a tunnel tent, yes, the structure is dependent on four peg points. So basically you push the poles in, you peg out one end, you lift it out, pull it, peg down the other end. So these 4 pegs create that strong structure. And then you have guy lines and things that support that structure. I will argue that with the dome tent, yes, it's not as dependent on that structure, those 4 pegs, but you're still going to want to bunker it down as much. I always, whenever when I hear someone who's like, oh, well, I don't use the pegs or the guy lines, I just put my bag inside it. And that is a complete recipe for disaster, because when the wind comes in underneath, it starts lifting the poles, and you just have one heavy thing. It's just asking for breaking the tent. So the tent will perform optimally when you have it staked out properly, whether it's a dome or not. And that's why we have our guy lines. The tents are always ready for storms. The guy lines are attached to the tent. They're tied on and always ready. And I think
another pet peeve of mine, you're the only ones that I know that really do that on the market. You get kind of a little bag with some guy lines that are thrown in, and a lot of people don't know how to tie knots. That's kind of a problem. So because I can't speak from the feedback you get, but improper staking of a shelter. I mean, even staking it down but wrong. Like I had a friend that had a Nalo, and rather than pulling the last guy outline out and away, he actually pinned them in.
Yeah, that's not good.
It was comical because the wind would blow it, making an accordion, and I was like, dude, like physics, like holy cow. And so like all the failures that I hear about are generally start off with they just didn't have the guy outlines, or they didn't have them done correctly. And then it also, after that is just durability wise, with some of the lesser tents that just blow up.
Yeah, I mean, the pole breakage we see is usually that the pole sections were not inserted properly, and you see a break at the insertion point. Or if we see it on the lower end, that it's usually that someone has pulled the guy lines too tight on the tunnels. So we have these double line runners on the guy lines so that you can adjust them. But it's very easy to get super strong with them. So we want to have them so that they're holding onto the tent but not pulling in and deforming the pole. So those are the main things. Or like you said, if a peg is not, like if a peg comes down overnight and the tent starts flopping around, or if it's not anchored. But other than that, like even like some people think you can't put tunnel tents sideways in the wind, but when they're straight. So again, with those 4 peg points, I always say you should be able to flip a quarter on the ridge line. When you have that, and that's again by pegging the one end, lifting it up and pulling it out. With those 4 pegs, you should be able to basically have that structure. I sometimes get photos and like people are so happy with their tent and it is sagging, or like they're used to putting the pegs down by the poles first. And if you do that, you can never stretch the ridge line enough. And then it can't perform optimally. It's going to move around a lot more. It's going to make more noise and all the things. So
You have, I need to say, you have multiple videos going into great depth. So that's one of the things, like, when I'm making fun of somebody, I'm like, Google that shit. Like, you can pull out many different videos on
Yeah,
your page on how to stake them down, correctly. And I mean, and learning how to do a dead man anchor above and beyond, like how that works as well, snow. And then obviously, I'm not, something I urge people to do is occasionally, depending upon where you're going, is you can always upgrade the stakes, right? If you're really worried about it, especially on your pinnacle points of maybe you're a more robust or longer,
exactly.
type.
Yeah, the tents come with a certain sort of different labels, come with different pegs. I personally always do a little bit of a mixture of pegs when I'm out. So we sell extra pegs so that you have something that's a little bit longer, a little bit wider. We also have snow pegs, which are designed to be dead manned. They have a line and a hook that you can do, and you can just shove it down with a shovel or with your foot. So that's also, but yeah, anchoring is really important for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, most of the ones, there's other things that people do that we could probably touch on. When you grab your stakes, shaking the shit out of them to get them together is really bad. That causes like constant.
Oh, the poles, you mean?
What I say, stakes? Yeah, the poles. When
The
you grab
pole.
your poles, I'll see people do that, and they'll just shake the crap out of them, and then they snap together. If you only use your tent once a year, probably may not ever see. But if you're setting them up constantly, that impact can cause problems.
Yeah, I always do it more or less one on one. It takes me a couple of seconds more, but it's gonna make your pole last longer for sure.
Yeah.
And then the slippers is the other thing that is the bane of my existence. Is zippers, right? They are very, very sensitive to getting sand and dirt in them. What happens if is basically they wear down the slider and the teeth so that it no longer closes behind it. So that's why we have attachment points for all the doors, so that we encourage people not to have the doors laying down in the dirt. Like, you always put them to the side, but zippers is usually my biggest nightmare.
Yeah, well, let's touch on that, because what I do may not be correct. I mean, I wipe them down, and then I actually have a wax that I use for the zippers, and I know that can cause sand to
Be
stick
attracted.
to them if you use
Exactly.
the.
So there's two schools of thoughts on that. And some people recommend it. We usually don't, because it does attract, or it has a tendency to attract more dirt. So then at the time being, right, when you put the wax on, it's going to feel better. But over time, you're actually going to leave more dirt in there, and then that's going to wear it down. So what we usually recommend is that when you're done with the trip, that you take a toothbrush. If you're on a long trip and it's in a lot of sandy area, so we have people that bike across the Gobi Desert and things like that, we actually recommend them to brush the zippers with a toothbrush or so every day. But for most use, especially your forested areas and things like that, it's after every trip to do it. But also, if you're set up along a riverbank or something like that, avoid the sand as much as you can, and then brush the zippers.
Yeah, and the only reason I bring that up is I don't give people that advice. That's just what I do, because I know if you're not paying attention, it can be problematic. Now, I'm not in a inherently sandy area compared to some, so that's one of the reasons. It's geographically.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't run into issues with zippers hardly ever because of that reason.
I was going to say, because of the area you're in, yeah.
But like when I'm in like Mexico and Texas, just with backpacks, the zippers will bind up in a day. Quickly.
Really,
so yeah,
it's challenging. We have like the paddlers that are always on coastal areas and things like that, and it's very challenging.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
But we can replace sliders, so you can bring extra sliders and replace them. And that's, again, like we build in, when we construct the tents, we make them so that you actually can with fairly small interventions, you can replace a slider, for instance. So if people are on a longer trip or out, if you have a couple of sliders, you can put on a new slider. And then we can also replace. We have repair facilities at our office here in Woodinville or outside of Seattle. So we can repair, we can replace zippers and things like that. The only thing that, like we talked about, the only thing that can't really be replaced is when the UV has damaged the outer tent fabric too much. But then we can usually just sell the outer tent, or, we can work that out. But UV is, other than that, we can pretty much repair. Almost even the most bear attacked tents, we can usually repair.
Yeah, I'm sure you run into that with where your shelters are used. We're hitting 45 minutes. Is there anything that I've missed that you want to
many
cover
things.
above and beyond?
I can talk about tents for hours and hours.
Yeah, no, I know. But as far as like wave tops, is there anything I haven't hit that you wanna touch on?
No, but I think that we like I said, every detail is there for a reason, and we only do what we believe is the strongest and most appropriate for what we're doing. And that's kind of what we've been doing for 50 years, and that's what we're passionate about doing. So also that we have our own factory, so we haven't really touched on that. We have all the tents are made in Europe, in Estonia, either in our factory or one of our contractors that in Estonia are that only make our tents. So that's our trained seamstresses that make them, and that takes an hour to get there from our office in Sweden. So it's very close, and it allows us to keep the quality control really, really well, because we're very, very hands-on with it. And then our big tents are made, and the DAC is the best pole manufacturer, and they have a factory in Vietnam where we make our big tents, our group tents, because we can't fit them in our factory in Estonia. And that's going really well. And that's a partnership that we've worked with them with our poles for over 40 years now.
They've been in the game a long, long time. So,
yeah. So they're also kind of same philosophy as we have when it comes to quality. So they do our big tents. So things like that are also important. It's not just sent off to some factory where basically everybody makes the tents for someone.
Yeah, and I've been to those factories. It's pretty crazy, both for shelters as backpacks where...
Yeah, here's a pile of this brand, here's a pile of this brand, here's a pile of this brand. You sew one brand in the morning, another one in the afternoon. That doesn't happen with our tents, obviously.
And you do get a lot of the lick and stick factory shelter companies, where somebody wants to come out with a shelter. There's a company that I, know of that I'd work with it. They kind of show up, or they have a broker from overseas, and that broker contacts you, and then you just open a catalog, and then you pick this, and this, and I want to put our logo here. And then it's met, and, that happens a lot. And when I say that, I'm, maybe they produce great shelters, maybe they don't, but a lot of times you get the Friday night build. When I say that, meaning if you truly look at the shelter, there's going to be a lot of discrepancies because they're mass produced. And anytime you're lick and stick on anything, you're getting a subpar product. And I don't know that really could be, argued, because the end user is the one that has to deal with the result. The person in the middle really has had nothing to do with anything on and around beginning to end. Yeah. They're just there to sell the product, and their heart's not really into that product.
Yeah. We sometimes say it would be so much easier to do that. You don't have to deal. But It would be a totally different thing. It's not, we are, every single stitch we are involved in. And that's, it's what gives me gray hair, but it's also what makes us be able to stand behind what we do in the way we do.
And now I did a podcast maybe a month or two ago, and I was going over different shelters and the pros and cons. And I always follow up with and not because you're on here, like if your life depends on it, you want to use a Hilleberg. And anybody that's guided caribou in October, a good example, they're probably in a Hilleberg if they know what they're doing. And when you see the catastrophic failures, it's like anything. It only takes one time to touch the stove where you're like, and the biggest thing is weight, right? A price I don't hear as much about, like it's generally weight, right? And I mean, I think people think price, the weight should go down. You can have quality, quantity, or cost efficiency. Like with construction, you can have any two of those you want. Well, you can't have lightweight and durable. I don't care what you do.
No.
You just do it. And if you went with something like, let's say, a Cuban fiber, which has got many downsides, that might be light, but the poles, if those are light, it's a moot point. You have to have the durability of the poles. And I'm kind of anti Cuban fiber myself. I'm not a big fan of that. And I mean, the other thing too is time tested. There's really not any other company like yours where it's truly, time tested for that many years. So
no, for sure.
Yeah. I appreciate you coming on here, and then that way I don't have to worry about screwing anything up because I'm in charge, right? So you've got the person in charge. So, but I can't say, like, again, with the life depending on a thing is no joke. And I've had these things all over the place, and I have had the benefit of testing everything, and I've had almost everything but your shelter blow down or warranty. I've definitely had to warranty a lot of other shelters. And I think in my entire time of using your shelter since 2007, I think I had one phone call for one minor issue. And that's a long time with one minor issue. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You remember that?
I don't. I think I put those things out of my head. No, I'm just joking.
It was something goofy. It was how those two little rods on the Acto.
Yeah.
There was something wrong with the stitching on one where the vertical, those two.
Yes, okay. And that's also like there's humans that sew our tents, right? So it happens that there's like a sewing error or things like that. And that can happen for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing though, because I think that was probably in 2010.
Yeah.
So long time. And I've used just about it, not every, but a lot of your shelters. Some of the shelters you make, I just don't, I don't, you make 6 different black label shelters. I only have one body, right? So I only need to use one, but I've used almost all of your shelters.
Yeah, for sure.
But, I appreciate it. Oh, where can everybody find you? Like, where not you, most of you are horses on your page, but where can everybody find
out here with the wind machine? No, Hilleberg.com.
Okay. And do you guys have a social media page?
We do. We have Hilleberg Hunting on Instagram and Facebook. So you can do there. And if you Google, you also can get a lot of videos. Or you go to our YouTube is under Hilleberg the Tentmaker.
Oh, cool. Right on. Well, I appreciate the friendship and as well as the
Thank
amazing.
You so much.
And slap Stuart for me when you get in the back of the head.
I will. So good to see you. Been way too long.
Yeah. No, I will. I'll do. My life has been hectic in a good way, and a lot of things coming up. But no, I'll definitely stay in contact more often. So
awesome.
Appreciate everybody tuning in. Petra, on your end, when I hang up, you got to hang out for a minute while this downloads before you hang up. So
I have to hang up for a minute before it hangs up.
Don't hang up.
Okay.
You know what I mean.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.